Hello folks, we are back to our Django tutorial, and today I want to talk about forms a little bit more. And to do that, I made a small change in models. I added this comment char and comment text, which is CharField and TextField, so we can play with them as well, and we can see how they're being handled by Django. So let's just go ahead and add these two in here. So comment char is models.charField max length, make it 255, let's say. And then we have null and blank, and here the same null and blank for text field. Okay, then obviously go to your terminal and do the Python manage py make migrations, and then Python manage py migrate, and that's gonna make those migrations there in your database, so you can use those fields. Okay, so back to forms. Again, this is also changed for today. It takes a little bit more time to prepare for a tutorial where I'm typing with you. So because I really have to save time, I'm writing those changes that we are going to go through, and then we are going to talk about those changes in depth. So I think at the end of the day it does the same job, but I save some time. Okay, so let's go from the top. I did add this date time in here because we wanna do some validation on date. So add it in here. In here, I removed this widgets because I added those fields in here where we can add the widget in here. So, okay, what happened? Before, all we had was this very short block of code, which basically was saying, okay, the model that we're using for this model form is income. And then we listed out all the fields that we want to include. And I also added comment char and comment text, so add that in there. And then we said, okay, for widgets, I want the date to be this date input that inherits from date input. And we just change that to input type. And it has to be done if you want to have this nice widget with the date picker. Okay. And what I did in here is I went through all the fields that we want to include, and I tried to do the default behavior for them. Let me see. Okay, except for this, because I was just playing around with some stuff in here. So let me just comment this back. And we have this here. So let's take that out for now. Okay. And have a look. So these are the fields that we're looking at. So let's now go to our web page and go to add income. And that is pretty much the default view. If you look at these fields, you can see that there is the value that is required, date that is required, type that is required. And the only difference, and you'll see in a second, if I didn't put that field in there and specify what I want to do with it, there would be 4 dashes here because we don't have a default in the model. And I'll get to that in a second. Then we have repetitive, which is not required, but it's just a Boolean. So it's either true or false. And then we have repetition interval that starts with NA, repetition time, and then we have those comments that are not required. Okay, let's go back and just comment this out. Comment the whole thing out. So as if it wasn't there. So as if we started from the point where we were at before, and except for having this widget here. And let me just refresh the debugger or the server and reload, and what we have, you could see that change here. This is the default type selection, which basically is nothing. You have to have a look and be like, okay, this is required, and it's not selected at all, so you have to do make an action here. In this case, by default, it's NA. And why is it? So, okay, first of all, it's very similar because these are the defaults from Django. How does Django know how to go with those defaults? Let's go back to our code and go to models. And that's the beauty of Django and using the classes that come with Django. So if you look here, let's start from the top. So let's have a look here. We are looking at income model. Okay. So if you design your model in a specific way where you put your restrictions and so on, that way you start forming your form in HTML. This is being formatted using the model. So let's have a look here. We have a value that is models decimal field. So if you go here, if you try to type in some text, it doesn't go in. It's automatically being set as a decimal field. And then we have max digits 10 and decimal places 2. So let's try to do, so you have the decimal places here. Okay, then we have the date without the date picker. So that's the thing that we had to fix with this bit here. Okay, that's the date picker that we created. That was pretty easy. And also obviously we had to build this so we can put it in here. but that's the easy part. Then we have the positive. Okay, so we have the type that is using choices. So that's what I love about Django. Look at this. We have a small integer field here. So that should be treated as an integer, but then we're using choices. And automatically Django knew that we're using choices. And in here you can see that it default is nothing. We don't have a default. So it says, hey, it is required, but you need you have to look at it and put something yourself. You can't just leave it blank. And in here we have the repetitive. So repetitive is a Boolean field that by default is false. So it is false. Then we have repetition interval. So again, we have this small integer that is has some choices here, and by default it's 1. So as you can see here, it is set to NA, which is the first option in options. If you scroll up here, you have the interval, 1 is NA. Okay. And then we have the time. So again, it's a positive small integer, just like this one, but it doesn't have choices. And by default, it's 0. So if you go here, you can see that it is an integer. So you can choose an integer, and by default, it was 0. Okay, and then we have comment char, comment text. They are all nulled. So I allowed both of them to be null, true, blank, true, here and here. And this one has the length 255 because it's a char field, and you can see that char field is a line, and date time field, and text field is text area in HTML. So by default, it knows exactly what to do, and it gives you very user-friendly form in HTML, which is brilliant. But obviously, at some point, you want to say, hey, I want to add a bit more to that. I want to give it some classes or IDs or just, custom HTML. And how do I do that? So we're going to have a look at that today. So let's go back to the forms and uncomment those guys back to live. And let's try to tweak the defaults. So now we are pretty much at the defaults, except for this, which again, I couldn't find a straightforward way to make it like this. So this is like added choice. That is like none. And not to make it too complicated, I'm not going to build it myself, but that's the only difference. The rest is just defaults. So for example, we have this value here. What if we want to say that by default, we want it to be, so let's refresh, and by default, it's nothing. But what if I want to put some default here? I don't have any default here, but maybe I want to just, as a form, we have different forms, for example, you build different forms for different users, and this form should start with like 100. So what to do that, you do initial. Initial is 100. And if I refresh and go here and refresh, we have this value put in by default. So initial, in terms of forms, we use the word initial instead of the default, but it does exactly the same thing. Okay. Then what if we want to have the date picker? So instead of doing this, we can just go in here and say, hey, I want a widget that is date input. And if I go, and as you can see, we don't have to put those brackets there. If I go back here and refresh, we have this widget back in. Okay. I didn't try that, but let's try to do. So let's put in initial, and we did import this datetime here, date. So let's try to do date dot today. Okay. Let's refresh that. Go here, refresh, and by default, it makes it today. Okay. And if you want to change that, you can change it to whatever you want. Okay, let's go further. So we have the type in here. So we have the choices. We can do by default. So by default, it goes to the first one, to salary. But maybe I want it to be other by default. So number 4. So let's go and do initial 4. And refresh, reload, and it's other. So that's how you make it default number 4, so other. Okay, and then we go to repetitive. By default, it's not required, but what if we say it is required, true, okay? Reload, and it is indeed required now. By default, it's false, so it's really not, it doesn't really work for Boolean, but we can actually check that in here. So we have required false. If we change that to true, it's gonna make us put the data in. Okay, so we have repetition interval. Again, it's choices with initial 1. So we looked at that already. We have repetition time, which is an integer field with initial 0. Again, we can change the initial here if you want. and then we go to comment char. And I build these two just to play around. We're gonna probably get rid of them, or maybe just leave like a comment for all of the income and outcome, just to have this field there. But for now, I just want to play around with CharField and CharField in model and TextField. So CharField and TextField here. So let's go back. So there is no such thing as text field, okay, in forms. So we have to go with CharField for both of them. But this one can use this widget, forms Textarea. So this is how it's being handled by default. If you go here and you look at this, so if we change that max length, which by default would be just 255 that we set in models, if we didn't have that line, then by default it's 255. But we add this line in form, so we can change that. So if we want to make it 20 now, and refresh, and we go to the comment and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And at some point I can't write, okay? So it stops me at 20, and that's how you change it in here. Then we have required false. What if I said required true and try to pass nothing in there? So let's refresh. We have now char with the star, and it says please fill this field because yeah, it's required. The rest of the required don't have already have some default. This one doesn't have any default, and that's why we are getting this error here. Please fill. Although in models, if we go to models, comment char is not required. It can be null, it can be blank. So by default, it should be able we should be able to pass nothing in there. But but by saying, hey, I actually want some information there, we can change that in form, on form level. And why would you use that? Again, if you had different forms for different uses, sometimes you need that to be filled, and sometimes you don't have to be. You don't need that to be filled. That's how you control it from form level. So database allows you to pass nothing in there, but then on the form level, you decide if it's required or not. Okay, and then we have comment text. So again, as I said, we don't have something called text field like we do in models. So to make it a nice big text area, we need to pass this forms text area widget to widgets. And we didn't have to do this for this widget because by default, it does the job that we wanted to do. We can pass a bit more information there, and I'll show you in a second how. So let's comment this out and uncomment something that I worked on before. I was kind of playing around. So let's see what we get after we use this. Refresh. So we have some placeholder. If I start writing, it disappears. So we have a placeholder here. We have some help text in here. And so let's have a look what we have on our backend side. So we can pass something called attributes. And in here, I said I want to have this placeholder. So basically, these are the HTML attributes, and we can pass them here. So placeholder is HTML, class is HTML, ID, rows, colors. It's all stuff that you would put in HTML. So it's pretty easy. These two don't work because we are using Bootstrap with Crispy, but you can pass them if you want to, and you're not using anything that controls that stuff. So class ID. So if you want to make it, I don't know, you want to add, I don't know, m left 5 for some reason. So you push it away from the left side. If you refresh, it didn't work because it shouldn't be dash in here. Okay. And refresh, and we have our margin here. Okay. So basically you're passing a class in here. If you want, you can pass an ID. So if you want to have, for example, some JavaScript that is working with your form, you can pass an ID here so you can grab certain elements there, and so on. Then help text is so basically that's the text here. What else can we add? We probably want to look at label. So if you want to change the label, hello world, and change that, refresh, and instead of comments text, it's hello world now. So you have pretty much full power over this form. It's just not changed in HTML, it's changed in Django, but it's still, you can change whatever you want. Okay, now that we went through what we can do with the fields, let's have a look at the methods. So we have a range of methods that we can use, and basically again catch certain moments in the life cycle of the form. So let's have a look. Let's maybe put those breakpoints here so we can see what is the actual workflow after we submit a form. So we start with the isValid, okay? So isValid is the place where we are checking if all the constraints are correct. So let's have a look at the models. It's looking at all of these constraints here. So isValid by default is going through all of these constraints here, all of the models basically, all of the fields in the model basically, and check if they can be saved. And then we can add some of our logic here as well. So let's have a look here. So for isValid, we return something that is supered from isValid itself. So whatever is done by default, it returns true or false. So we're going here. If it's false, then we don't even want to do our custom checks because, well, I suppose we do want that because we can then, yeah, because then we can have those errors on our HTML actually. Yeah, let's do that. Let's go back and refresh. Well, we can refresh later. So then we are doing some checks. So let's try to do those checks. Let's add this to the comment and look at how defensive I am. It's Marek's fault. So let's just refresh maybe, actually. Okay, so refresh does no. From scratch, we have the date, salary, and let's just say it's Marek's fault, okay? Submit, and we're going here, and isValid for now is true, so that's fine. And then we're going here, and we added this error here saying common text has an error in it, and it's never Marek's fault. So let's just let it go. And since the validation didn't go through, we didn't stop in any of these. Let's put this in here as well. So we didn't stop in any of other lifecycle methods. And what we have here is it's not Marek's fault, okay? So you can, obviously this is a silly example, but this is how you kind of approach your validation. You check something on each field, you can do a check, and then if that check doesn't hold, then you say add error. You say what is the field that you're checking and what is the error that you're experiencing. So it's very good for sending the information back to the user, saying what's wrong with the data that they provided. Okay, and then we have a date here. So this is also an example that we don't. So I'm going to just comment that out because we are not going to actually use that there. And also we are going to change the name of the comment. So anyway, form date. So we are not going to use that for a long run. But for example, you're building some form that can be backdated. So for example, you have to add information about today or the future, but if something happened yesterday, you can add that information. So let's try this. Let's go and try to add an income for yesterday and submit. We go here and we get this information here saying income cannot be backdated. Okay, so that's how validation works. Again, we don't want that in our code. We probably don't want the validation here for now. Well, we can leave it just for the future if you want to have a reference. So you can leave this. It's gonna just do its job for now. You don't need this piece of code in your code for now, but if you need to add some validation, you have a nice place and nice example how it works. Okay, so what's the next step? Let's go and maybe release this because we don't want that to stop us. Let's try again. So the validation went through. So next step will be cleaning the data. Cleaning the data means that when you pass something in, you can change it slightly. It's not the place where you want to stop from working properly. Like you don't want to say, oh, I found an error. You probably want to put it in the isValid, but you can clean that data. So you can clean all, or you can clean field by field. So as you can see, it stopped at clean common text first before it went to clean the general cleanup. Okay, so what we are doing here, we are grabbing the comment from clean data. So let's open self and have a look at clean data and what is the difference between clean data and the data. So Django by default goes in and says, okay, so that's the data that came in from HTML, from the client side. We are seeing some cleaning here, but that was by default, that was done by HTML. Then we have some empty string, we have repetition time. So that's all string because that's what is being sent by HTTP. But then Django grabs it and says, okay, I know my value is a decimal. So I want to change that string into decimal. Then I know it's going to be a date. So I'm changing the string into a date. and so on. So you can see, for example, comment char is none, although it was an empty string, because we said, yeah, it can be none. In our model, we said, yeah, it can be none. So null true. So yeah, that's how it works. So we want Django to clean it first, and then we grab whatever it cleaned and we do some operation on it, and we do our cleaning. And for example here, it's impossible somebody says Marek is lame. I'm gonna change it to Marek is awesome. So let's try that. Let's just go and finish this up, and it was successful. So again, let's go back and do Marek is lame. Okay, and I go and I submit that. It worked. So we have 37, and we need to go to localhost /admin and admin password, and let's go to incomes, go to the last income, and here it is, Marek blabber, and you'll see why that came in here, and instead of Marek is lame, we change it to Marek is awesome. So that's how you clean your data. Obviously, this is a silly example again, but let's say you have email field where somebody is messing up the email addresses. You, for example, somebody puts in capital letters and you want just everything to be lowercase. So that's how you clean your data. Okay, and what is this bit? What is this Marek blabber? In here, I have my clean. So then after we go through clean comment, clean whatever value, whatever fields you want to clean, you can then have this method called clean just period. You can clean all the stuff in here. And well, basically you probably, you know, why would you use clean comment, clean value separately? Maybe to organize your code better. You can do the same thing in one place. And that's what I did with my comment char and comment text. So I'm cleaning two different fields at the same time. And what I'm saying here is, okay, if I have a comment char, then if it exists, if it's not null, and Marek says is not in comment char, I want to say, hey, add that Marek says at the beginning of my comment. And the same here with Marek blabbers. So that's for the longer text, okay? And again, it's a very silly example, but you can basically do it in clean. And then you have to return that clean. So look what's happening here. First, we grab clean data from self clean data, and we get the information from it. And then if we want to replace it, we need to again grab this clean data and put whatever data we want to put into the field that we want to put it in. Okay, the same happens here. But again, we won't be doing this. This is a silly example. This I can just get rid of completely. And okay, that works. And then we have the save. So let's have a look here. Let's just get rid of this. Okay, let's go here. And then we can grab the save moment. So let's go back in here and try to save again. So value 1, 2, 3, 4, salary, submit. And if you want to grab this moment, and for example, you want to log it somewhere. So for now, I just log it to console. You can log it to, maybe you have your logging setup that you want to use. And also you want to have a look at the instance you build. So you first can super save commit false. So we don't save it in the database yet. And then if commit is true, so we do something here, by the way. So this is where you probably want to change something about this instance. For now, I don't have an example that we can have a look here, but basically, yeah, you have the date in here and you have the value in here. Maybe you want to change it on this level, although you probably don't want to do that. Maybe some other stuff might be happening here, like logging, or maybe sending a trigger to some other place to do another thing. But basically, after doing the save, after we are happy, okay, this is working well, then we can say, okay, instance save without saying commit false. So by default, it's true. So instance save and then return instance. So if I go back to the instance now, you will see that we have the created at, which means that it has been created. And if we go and look for ID, we should, okay, here's the PK is 38. So that's how it works. Okay, so again, I'm gonna leave it as it is, because that's gonna allow us to save whatever, and we have this nice place to do something if we want to do something. But for now, that's gonna be it. So just to clean up, also I'm gonna get rid of this because I don't want this to be as wacky as it was. By default, it should work anyway. So if I go here, we have our comment here, that works fine, okay? And if we want our examples, they are all in here, so we can grab it from here. Okay, another thing for the cleanup, I'm gonna get rid of this from here and then change this to comment only, okay? And go to terminal, make my, oops, yeah, and I need to go to the form and change this to comment, and that should work. Let me see if we have comment text anywhere, so let's look for it. Comment text, so let's change it to comment, and then, okay, so let's just replace it. Replace it with comment. Okay, and that was done with Command R to replace. Okay, and now we can go to terminal, make migrations. Yes, I did change it to comment and migrate. Okay, so that's done. Let's have a look at our form. Let's have a look now. Comment is here, so we have everything working fine. And we know what to do if we want to do some cleaning, some validating, and grab the form before we save it into the database. Cool. For now, let's leave it pretty much at the default. I know it looks messy, but that way, basically we could go back all the way to what we had before. So just delete all of this and just leave this, and it's going to work exactly the same. But what I like to have is a bit of notes. So this is my note basically. If I want to go back and say, hey, how did I add the attributes there? Let's go back to my forms and I'll see in my comments. Oh, there it is. And for now, you know, because it's not for somebody, for now we're just working on a project that is just for us. It's nice to keep it that way. Once you learn, once it stays in your head, you don't have to go back to your code. You can sort it out, you can delete that, because obviously this is not a nice code for nice comment for anyone else. But as you learn something new, it's nice to leave whatever work you did with the tutorial commented out. You know where to find it, and you just go there and grab it from there. Okay, so let's finish here. Next video will be about authentication and logging in. So I think it's going to be pretty interesting. So thanks for watching and see you later. Bye-bye.